We need God. Only God can bring us out of this mess.
And you me, but that's the way it's supposed to be. That'll be you, that'll be me, and that'll be different and unique. I'm gonna be the best me I can be by letting His glory shine through. That'll be you, that'll be me, and that'll be.
It's a beautiful day in the neighborhood. First name's Doni, last name's Glover. In it to win it for the long haul, baby. Today we have joining us the one and only Baltimore City State's Attorney Marilyn Mosby. I'm going to bring her on up. Good morning.
Good morning, Doni. How are you?
I'm all right. I'm all right. I just want to say publicly, we're very proud of you.
Thank you.
You know, I got a little threatening text from one of my friends this morning. I gotta read it to you. He said, Handle, you should hear this. Mr. Rondi. See, they do some sponsorship of your organization, then they come. Let me tell you, said, please handle my friend with care. In years to come, based on her commitment to Black men and equal treatment, she may be the one getting a Presidential Medal of Freedom. Rondi Griffin.
Aww.
Folks believe in you.
That is my good friend. He was once my neighbor, so he's always looked out. I appreciate that.
So, Madam State's Attorney, I remember, do you remember going to James Mosher baseball parade?
I do. We went a couple of years.
But the very first time you went was the year you ran. Mm-hmm. And so much has happened since then.
So that was 2014. I know. I feel like I'm like 70 years old.
Is that how it feels?
Yes.
Would you have done it again?
Absolutely. I wouldn't do anything differently.
Who could see Freddie Gray coming?
I don't think anybody could see it. I mean, well, I didn't expect it 4 months into my first term. But it was happening all across the country. And when I was thrust into the spotlight, because I did what I would do again, I followed the facts with the law. You had an innocent 25-year-old man by the name of Freddie Carlos Gray Jr., who made eye contact with police in a high crime neighborhood, decided to run, who was unconstitutionally arrested, placed into a metal wagon head first, feet shackled and handcuffed, essentially defenseless in the back of that wagon. And when his spine was partially severed in the back of that wagon, his pleas for medical attention were ignored. I followed the facts with the law, and I wouldn't do anything differently, Doni.
And then it was all of the other incidents around the country. And so it was, has America changed?
I think America has changed. I mean, to some extent. If you think about that time period, you had Michael Brown, you had so many others that, you know, the prosecutors in those particular cases, and prosecutors are one of the most important stakeholders in the criminal justice system. We decide who's going to be charged, what they're going to be charged with, what sentence recommendations we're going to make. We make a decision as to whether someone gets into the criminal justice system in the first place. And that accountability wasn't being had in this country. That accountability where you're holding police officers accountable for the death of a Black man. And, you know, when we look at what happened, that accountability ultimately led to exposure. A week after I charged those officers, the Department of Justice came in, exposed the discriminatory policing practices of the 8th largest police department in the country. That exposure ultimately led to reform. We now have a federally enforceable consent decree. And because of that reform, we had a spotlight on the entrenched police corruption at one of the largest police agencies in the country.
The average citizen, I live here in Sandtown, Western District, just around the corner.
So do I.
Years ago, so many names, but there's an activist in Baltimore, Charlie Duggar, and he was among those who would lead protests there at Western District. But when I think about all of the people who, I mean, we've seen things in Sandtown that most people don't see, like when a police might run up on somebody, they catch them dirty, and they'll say, well, if you go get us a gun, we'll let you go. These are things that happen here in a city that maybe people elsewhere don't realize, but these things happen. I saw the police not long ago, just around the corner. They caught a white guy Sunday morning. I'm out there walking the dog. They catch him. They put the cuffs on him. They take his crack or dope or whatever he had. He tells them where he got it from. They take the cuffs off of him and he walks away. We see this now. We see it all the time. And what's really changed, one of the things that's changed is we now have this inundation of white addicts in the Black community, or as I'm supposed to politically correctly say, a number of addicts who don't fit the majority demographic.
Right.
But the police walk right past them, and they're breaking in houses. Hey, we already have the drug problem, but it's like the police won't do anything now. The police, and I think it goes back to when they were charged. The police have taken a knee in Baltimore. That's how it seems.
So, I mean, I think that clearly is something that some police officers do. They didn't want that type of accountability. But for the most part, I don't know what to say. If they did the same thing when we had to go and get the consent decree. You had certain officers like, well, now that we have to constitutionally police, we can't do our jobs, right? And I think that that's an excuse. And anybody that says that they can't do their job because they can't arrest someone suffering from substance use disorder, right? Like, treat it as the public health crisis that it is treated in the suburbs. That's one of the reasons why we came out with our policies. We were attempting to actually slow the spread of COVID, and we consulted with public health experts. And during that time, we knew that the jails were going to be an incubator for the virus. And so we did an exercise that a number of other states across the nation were doing. And we said, let's look at those minor offenses, right, that we believe in theory have nothing to do with public safety. So let's look at those offenses where the individual is cycled in the jail within a matter of 24 hours, like trespassing, like, urinating in public, like substance use disorder and possession. I'm not talking about distribution. You're distributing drugs. Yes, we should still be going after those individuals, but individuals that are suffering from substance use disorder, sex work. Like, let's look at these offenses during this pandemic, and let's figure out how we can just ensure that the individuals that are in the prisons and in the jails are the individuals that actually pose public safety risk. It was rather astonishing, though, Doni, because let me tell you, in that year, right, we did this, and this was temporary. We made this decision temporary. But in that year, the data was astounding, because unlike 63 of the 66 major municipalities in the country, meaning 63 major municipalities, their violent crime went up. For the first time, in that year that we stopped prosecuting these minor offenses, our violent crime went down by 20%. Our property crime went down by 39%, right? And so what we thought in theory was actuality. And we said, okay, well, guess what? These minor offenses probably never had anything to do with public safety. And so we came out, Johns Hopkins did an independent review, and they said that the target population of my policies, those weren't the ones, they weren't the trigger pullers, right? And they weren't the ones that were committing subsequent offenses, because there was a less than 1% recidivism or reoffending rate. The statewide reoffending rate and recidivism rate is 40%. And so what we thought in theory was actuality. And so based off of the fact that, one, there's no public safety value based on the data. Two, we're coming out of a global pandemic where at that point, we didn't know how long the courts were going to be closed. They ended up being closed for almost 2 years. And we needed to focus on violent crime, right? Knowing that there was going to be a backlog. And then third, we were all in our homes, stuck at home, when we saw time and time again these minor offenses that had nothing to do with public safety, how that can lead to a death sentence for Black people in this country. And so whether you're George Floyd and you're alleged to have passed a $20 bill during a global pandemic for groceries, whether you're Sandra Bland, who failed to put on a turn signal, whether you're Eric Garner, who was allegedly selling loose cigarettes, or Dante Wright, who either had air fresheners in his mirror, his rear view mirror, or an expired tag during a global pandemic, so did I. The Motor Vehicle Association was closed. But that can lead to a death sentence for Black people because it creates an unnecessary engagement. And so I came out and I was very vocal about the fact that we're no longer prosecuting. You can remember in 2019, we're no longer prosecuting marijuana. We know there's no disparate use among white and Black people when it comes to the consumption of marijuana. But if you're a Black person in America, you're 4 times more likely to be arrested for mere possession of marijuana. In the city of Baltimore, you were 6 times more likely to be arrested for mere possession of marijuana. And even after we decriminalized, 10 grams or less of marijuana, 42% of the citations they were issued in 1 out of 9 police districts. What I've always said, and what I will continue to say, is that as a state's attorney, I will never be complicit in the discriminatory enforcement of laws against poor Black and brown people.
Amen. One of the reasons it was so important to me for you to be on this show, I don't like bullies. I ain't the biggest guy, 5'9", got a pretty nice right hook, but I've never liked bullies. When I moved from East Baltimore to West Baltimore, it was a slightly different culture. In East Baltimore, my experiences were people would fight head up, one-on-one. Around 75, when we came to West Baltimore, I'm seeing people get banked. And so when I saw the media, this one particular station, Sinclair and the Smith family and Uzio and all of their restaurants, I have never, ever seen any media outlet in my life. I just turned 57. I've never seen one media outlet focus on one person, and it's a Black woman. And I have a problem with that. When one of your opponents, I call him Freak Nasty, but for the sake of intelligent conversation, Theru Vignarasha wants to be this symbol. And I wrote it. I don't know if you saw the article, but I wrote that if you had been caught on Greenmount Avenue after midnight driving on a suspended license with your headlights off, and a police would have pulled you over with a strange person a strange person in the car. He's giving, quote unquote, a woman a tour of Baltimore after midnight on Greenmount. I used to live 712, 714 East North Avenue. Nothing good goes on Greenmount after midnight. Had that been you, they were just right. It's unfair. And he got away with it. He talked his way out of it. And it was the Fox Town Hall in Little Italy where the white hero cop pulled him up on that and said, you can't do that. And that those 2 officers ended up being investigated because of that. I don't like an unfair fight. And you have had to fight. We don't have a lot of Black media in Baltimore. And so it is very important for me that you take this time and say whatever you want.
So, Doni, it's been a lot. When I tell you it feels like it's been 70 years, that's part of the reason, right? I think there's a level of misogynoir that exists in the media. I'm young, I'm Black, I'm a woman. I'm not as young as I used to be, right? But like the vitriol is just very different in the way that I'm covered. And you're absolutely right. I've received hate mail and death threats, have been mocked, I've been ridiculed, I've been harassed, I've been sued numerous times, including by the officers that we prosecuted, and I've been investigated. And every single time, and now federally indicted by some person that has been known to have political and racial animus towards me, has donated to both of my political opponents. And so,
yes, that's the Black man.
No, that's actually Leo Wise.
Wise.
He was leading the investigation before Eric Barron even took office. But I mean, I've always been victorious, right? And they'll write 1 million articles about how I'm corrupt or I've done something wrong or I'm unethical. And then when I'm shown to and proven and vindicated that I did absolutely nothing wrong, and like this coverage is just so incredibly biased, they'll write a small blurb at the bottom of the newspaper. Oh, it's just it's certainly biased, but I've come to learn how not to internalize it.
No, you've learned how to box left on them. They came this way, and you have learned how to counter it. Big ups to your team, including Zai. You have a team. I mean, you could now take that crisis management team and do the meanest PR company in the world.
I can tell you. Let me tell you. Yes.
Real talk.
Because I mean, people are always coming, and so doing this and getting that type of coverage and that type of bias coverage for 7 years, you do learn how to fight back. But I also don't internalize it. So I don't watch all of that negative media. I don't read the newspaper articles because it could get to your psyche at some point. I have to stay focused. I have to, focus on my job and not be distracted by the noise, because that's all it is. It's noise. It's trying to keep me and get me off my game and to ensure that we're not reforming the criminal justice system. And that's what I got into this job and this position to do. I graduated from a top 25 law school. I could have went and made really good money, right? Like at any sort of firm or do something that it wasn't a public servant. But I chose that my passion was to reform what I believe is the biggest sort of civil rights issue facing Black people in this country. And that is the criminal justice system. And so, yes, I'm very passionate about this job. I still love what I do, even despite the negative media coverage and all of the sacrifices that have to be made. I think my children make the ultimate sacrifice. And, I'm starting to try to figure out ways. My kids aren't 3 and 5 years old anymore. When I first started and when me and Nick started, running for these offices, they were 3 and 5. Now my kids are going to high school. They're turning 14 and 12, and they see this type of coverage. And you have to explain to them, what's happening. And no, mommy's not going to jail, right? Like, and mommy has always been attacked this way, and you can't believe what's in the media. And so, yeah, it does definitely take a toll, but at the same time, it's greater than me. It's not even about me, Doni. That's what's scary about it, right? Like once you realize it, it's not even about me. It's about the people that I represent. It's about the power of the people that I represent. They have always outraised me. Whenever I run, when I ran against Bernstein, when I ran the last time, they have raised this time more than $1 million combined to get me out of office. The people are circling the wagons. And when you think about it, it has to do with the fact that they are intimidated by the power of the people, that despite how much they raise, despite how negative they cover me, despite the villainization of me as this polarizing figure, all I want is equality for everybody. Despite all of that, they are still intimidated by the people that I represent.
You mentioned Greg Bernstein, the Shamrin case, where the Jewish task force broke a young boy's arm up. He was going to Northwestern High School, and Greg Bernstein did nothing about that. For me, that was a smack in the face of every Baltimorean, but particularly Black Americans. There was no outrage. There was no noise. And again, we are limited in Baltimore. That's why I do what I do, because we don't have a voice. We don't have a serious voice to combat. I don't, honestly, and my heart really goes out to your daughters.
Thank you.
I could not imagine all that they have seen. But I did see the commercial, and I saw, I think, your oldest daughter grab you by the hand. It may have been rehearsed, but I tell you, it looked real natural to me. And in that instant, I saw a little girl saying, "Mommy, gonna win this. Mommy, we're with you. Mommy, we're gonna fight." What has it done to your daughters?
So you know what? I mean, I because they were so little before, and I didn't have to explain anything to them, why mommy's being covered the way that I am. I think we've had 2 incidents, right, where just more recently, my 11-year-old was at school, and she said I guess I'm an example to some extent. I didn't realize how much, but she was at school, and this one really bothered me. I was having a great day, and she calls and she says, I said, hey, baby, how's everything going? And she says, Mommy, I didn't have a good day. I said, why didn't you have a good day? She said, because I stopped. I had a really bad day. There was a girl that was picking on another girl, and I said to her she needed to stop. She needed to stop bullying her. And she turned around to me and she said, that's why your mom's going to jail. And she said, Mom, I started to cry. And so I said to her, I said, baby, you can't cry in that situation. And let me tell you why. I said, because no matter what, you did what was right. And whenever you do what's right, someone is always going to come back and give you some sort of backlash. That's what that girl did. She was wrong, and she pretty much reacted. And I said, that's what happens with mommy. I'm going to always do what's right. And so I get backlash. That doesn't mean you don't do what's right, right? You got to continue. If somebody is being bullied, you step up and you stand up for them. That's what mommy does every day. And so there was that incident, and she understood. She said, I won't cry anymore. And then there was another incident where she was in a supermarket. She's 11. So she's in a supermarket, and she's being followed by this white woman in a store who's acting like she's, fixing the items on the what is it? You know what I'm talking about.
On the counter?
Yeah, no, like on the
display.
Yeah, on the display. And so she's in there with a group of kids. And so it was a group of like young Black kids. And so the woman kept following them, but she wasn't following any other group in the store. And so my daughter pulls out her phone. No, first she says, ma'am, why are you following me? And so she says, well, I'm not following you. I'm actually wandering. My daughter said, there's a difference between wandering and following. Ma'am, you clearly are following me. So she pulls out her phone. And so she pulls out her phone and she starts taping this white woman. And she starts following this white woman. And she's saying, ma'am, what's your name? What's your name? What's your name? And the woman is intimidated by this 11-year-old who's like, why does she have her phone on me? So the lady starts pulling out her phone. And so she's now taping a minor child. And my daughter's like, why are you following me? Are you following me because I'm Black? I think you're following me because I'm Black. Where is your manager? So my husband comes in, and my husband's irate because this grown woman, has this phone on my daughter. And so, make a long story short, she ended up meeting with the owner of the store. And she basically said, what are you going to do about this? You have to figure out a way in which you can resolve this so this doesn't happen again. And the woman's like, oh, well, I'm not going to say the name of the place, but she's like, oh, well, we had implicit bias training during COVID and we had to stop. And she's like, so I don't know what else to do. My daughter was like, well, I have 4 solutions for you. 1, you should probably hire somebody and get a surveillance system as opposed to having people follow people around the store. 2, she said, you should consider hiring a young person because clearly you're targeting young people and more specifically Black people. And 3, you need to make sure you re-implement that implicit bias training. So I was very proud of her, right? Like, so you have 2 extremes. They go through it because they hear those individuals that display hatred. We were at the Pride Parade, and there was a man who jumped into. My daughter was walking by. We were in a slingshot in the parade, and my daughter was right there. And he's screaming, "You're going to jail! You're going to jail!" right in front of my kid. And so, like, they have to deal with both of that. But at the same time, I want to hope that I'm some sort of example and have had an example on them because they're also very assertive and confident and leaders and not followers.
As you were talking about people following you in stores, I worked at Banana Republic downtown at the Inner Harbor at the gallery when it first opened.
I used to work at the Gap.
And they told us to follow Black people. I didn't work there long, but I remember Banana Republic at the gallery told me to follow Black people. Now, clearly that didn't work out long.
No.
I also remember now
they didn't know you, Doni. I'm surprised you didn't call them out sooner.
I was still young, but Ricestown Road Plaza, there was a head company there, and they followed Black people in that store. Now, I wasn't always a saint. I was probably up to some no good, but there was an old white lady in that store who was stealing more than I was stealing. Mm-hmm. She was wearing them out. I said, why don't you look at her? But they walked right past her because she played like she was on a pharmacy, on a medication or something. But we've seen it. And so let me just go to the heart of it. Back in 1907, there was a mayor of Baltimore named J. Barry Mahou. And he is known as the father of segregation. But fear not, there were two black attorneys that used to stay on him like white on rice. One was George McMecken. They named McMecken Street after him. And there was his brother-in-law, Ashby Hawkins. And this was, I believe they lived in the Druid Hill area. But this city has a history of not just segregation. They call Mahou the father of segregation. It was so insidious here in the city of Baltimore, this city.
Yeah.
Not only could blacks not move in the white neighborhoods, but they also leaned on whites and said whites could not move in the black neighborhoods. Has this segregation changed in your eyes?
No, I think not at all. I think we are still very much a segregated kind of community. But it's not politically correct, right?
I'll say it's still racist as hell. And so I gotta say this. Now, I know some Indian people. Sanjay Thomas has been a long time supporter. I love all people. You love me, I love you. I meet you with the same energy. You come in me with the hatred and vitriol because of something that I was born with. Yeah, I'm gonna fight back probably like you. But we deal as a black man in a majority black city.
Yeah.
I feel I can go any damn way I want. Now, when I was younger, we didn't go to Hamden all that much, and we didn't go down Monroe Street down in Washington Village, Big Town, because them white boys can fight down there. But Baltimore, but it is so insulting when someone who has less than 50 years history in this country comes here and looks you up and down, or don't want, when you're walking down the street. I taught my daughter, I got a daughter too. I practice, we walk down the harbor. And I don't care who here. I've seen black people walking down the harbor and a group of white people will come towards them and they will walk around, and I don't teach my daughter that. We're walking straight through. Because there's this little subtle racism that happens where we think, oh, well, we got a bad, this is 2022. You move. I ain't moving nowhere.
Well, you know what, Donnie, for me, I'm originally from Boston. Okay. So, we have a reputation of racial issues.
That man with the flag, but they were trying to put that flag in that black man. I'll never forget that picture out of my mind.
Correct. That was in City Hall in Boston. But I was actually part of one of the longest standing desegregation programs in the country. I actually was in a busing program where in the second grade, I was bused an hour out of the inner city of Boston to one of the richest towns in Massachusetts, where when I first started, I was the only black child in the entire school. And so at 6 years old with no teeth and like getting off a bus and like going into a foreign sort of environment, what I had to learn at 6 was that there's gonna always be this perception. The only sort of perception that those young kids had about black people came through the negative light of the media and through what they called us, the Metco kids, right? And so at very early on, I was a Metco kid. I had to figure out ways, and I would get all kinds of stereotypical sort of views about what black people were. They'd walk up to me like, "You go, girl," right? And I'm like, I don't talk like that. Why are you talking to me like that? And so you can easily get angered by that type of stereotypical sort of views, or you can understand it was due to a lack of exposure. And so at a very early age, at 6, I took on the responsibility of being a positive representation for black people. And so, I was co-editor of the school newspaper. I was bringing diversity workshops to the school. I was in all honors classes. I graduated, at the top of my class. And by the time I left, and there were only three black girls that graduated in my high school class, I was exhausted, right?
I would imagine so.
You get like, you're exposed to the socioeconomic disparities in the educational system. Like, why does it look like this in Boston, but why does it look like this in Dover Sherborne? I think these issues exist in America, and that is part of the reason why, I feel a responsibility to, one of my quotes when I graduated from high school was a Nikki Giovanni quote, and it was, "I would not reject my strength, though it's not by choice, but responsibility." That's what I feel about my job today, right? I would not reject my strength, though it's not by choice, but responsibility. 95% of the individuals making decisions about who's going to be charged, what they're going to be charged with, what sentence recommendations we're going to making a decision about who's going to get into the criminal justice system in the first place, 95% of them are white in this country. 79% are white men. And as a woman of color, I represent less than, all 7 years, I represent less than 1% of all elected prosecutors in the country. That has got to change, especially when it comes to this system that has disproportionately impacted us. In the state of Maryland, we incarcerate more Black men than any other state in the nation. That has got to change. And I can just tell you, some of my policies, we've done that. We've changed it. And so that makes you, a target when you disrupt the industrial prison complex and you start talking about their money. When I came out with my policies, I had one of the largest drug treatment facilities write an op-ed in the Baltimore Sun talking about how they were going to go bankrupt. I had to go back and forth with the judges who are saying, "Oh, well, the drug treatment court, it can't be funded." Change your business model, not off the backs of Black and brown people. Yeah. So what? Yeah. But that makes you a target, right? That makes you a target. And that's why they cover me the way that they do. If you look at even right now, my opponents that are running and who is backing them, look at their money, follow the money, right? Please follow the money. One of my opponents got $30,000 from Fox 45 and the Smith family. Another one of my opponents, has a whole bunch of PAC money, Republican PAC money from Hogan. And what they're running on is to go back to an era of zero tolerance policing. They're running on going back to mass incarceration and police abuse, an environment that created the GTTF scandal. We cannot afford to go back, Doni. When you think about all that we have been through in the past 7 years, from the untimely death of Freddie Gray, to the uprising, to the consent decree, to the 163-page Department of Justice report, to the having to play cleanup to the largest police corruption scandal. I mean, we've been through so much. 5 different commissioners, that's 5 different crime plans. That's 5 different command staff. That type of instability shouldn't exist in any government agency, corporation, or business, or you will never see progress. And yet, this only stability, despite all of that, my prosecutors, and you all have to hold me to account by what we do in the courtroom, we still have a 90% conviction rate. We still got $8.9 million additional dollars to better protect victims and witnesses of crime. We've served 52,974 victims and witnesses of crime since the start of my administration, which happens to be 95 times the number of victims and witnesses that we served in my first year in office. We've given 7,745 grief counseling sessions. We have the only family bereavement center in a state's attorney's office. As I stated, the only crime control and prevention division out of a state's attorney's office in this country, where we've touched more than 7,000 young people. So we got to continue to push forward, but we cannot go back. And that's what's being proposed right now.
I got to ask you, I want to go back to Boston. If you were one of 3 Black ladies, young ladies in the school, I'm just going to take a wild guess that you were called the N-word before. In Boston.
Well, it was in Dover because it was outside of the city of Boston, because it was a busing program. So, yeah, I mean, yes, I've had my incidents,
What sticks out in your mind? Because I imagine at some point you had to make a decision that boxing right ain't gonna work. You had to go left on.
You know what is funny? I guess they knew not to mess with me. I think a lot of folks in that school were a little afraid of me. My superlative, and I didn't write this superlative. A superlative someone else writes. your superlative. But they were like, Marilyn James, that was my maiden name, is going to be the next MLK, Malcolm X, preaching to the world, right? Like people knew pretty much not to cross me. And I was bringing, like I said, diversity and bringing history to the school because they had no exposure. And so, you know, I didn't have too many problems, even though a number of those kids, you know, they were racist, but they knew not to bring that to me.
You have to teach me a little more about Boston, because the only thing besides that picture is my favorite movie probably of all time. I'm just fessing. The town, about Charlestown.
Okay.
Ben Affleck, the bank robbery movie. I'm a big bank robbery. You mentioned mass incarceration. Black people, we make up what, 15, 20% of this country. This country has 5% of the world's population, but 25% of the world's inmates. I'm gonna say it again.
Yep.
America is addicted to locking up people of color. We make what? America is 5% of the world's population, 25% of the world's inmates, and half of them are us.
Yep.
How do you deal with that? I mean, I don't imagine you want to lock up people, yet there's some people, like Richard Pryor said, thank God for penitentiaries. But at the end of the day, we see a pattern, and we see it not happening to white people. I mean, white people can shoot 20, 30 people and get a trip to Burger King.
I mean, and that's part of the problem, you know, when we talk about mass incarceration, and that's what I'm attempting to eliminate as much to the extent that I can, right? When you see 72.23% of Maryland prison population are Black, like that's scary. That's incredibly scary. And why are we doing more to ensure equality and equity within the criminal justice system? That's what I'm attempting to do every day. And whether it's through our conviction integrity unit, where I started the first conviction integrity unit in the entire state of Maryland, right? Where we do reinvestigations into claims of actual innocence. And it's now not only a model that's being replicated by my colleagues across the state, but it's a national model. We have a work group that we convene, and people all across the country are trying to do the same thing. We've exonerated 12 innocent Black men who have cumulatively served 300 years in prison for crimes they didn't commit. Then my first guy, Malcolm Bryant, he served 17 years for a murder, and thanks to DNA evidence, he was exonerated. But only like 3 months after he was exonerated and freed, he died of a heart attack trying to get reacclimated into society.
Which is not easy.
No, it's not easy. I sat down with his mother and his sister, and they were grateful. They said, you know, I appreciate the program, but he was a different man, and he was having trouble getting an ID and you know, a job and a social security and guess what else? What was most important? He didn't get any mental health treatment, and he was suffering from post-traumatic stress disorder from being locked up in prison for a crime he didn't commit for 17 years. So as a result of that conversation, we created also, and they don't necessarily publicize this either, our Resurrection After Exoneration program, where we partner with the University of Maryland and we provide services to our exonerees, and they meet on a monthly basis. So in addition to helping them get reacclimated by providing financial skills and work skills and, you know, helping them get their IDs, we also help them get that mental health treatment because they are, in fact, traumatized. We had, you know, during the pandemic, I started a sentencing review unit. And that is, you know, I hired the second in command at the public defender's office, Becky Feldman. She's awesome. And we, in essence, modify the sentences and make recommendations for the modification of sentences and make recommendations for parole release. We've done that for over 40 individuals, Doni, right? These are juvenile lifers, individuals that have been incarcerated for like 40 years and more. It's not just the number of Black people that are incarcerated in Maryland. It's the excessive nature of the sentences that are imposed upon Black people in the state of Maryland that we are disrupting. And so when you say, why does Fox run this. I've never seen that type of coverage before. It's bigger than me. It's about disrupting that industrial prison complex that is built off the backs of Black and brown people.
I remember the day you charged the officers, and I was with some political people, and they looked at you on the news and said to themselves, and I'm just guessing, oh my God, she's going to run for mayor.
No, thank you.
Older Black politicians were shook up. I saw it with my own eyes. They saw your star going up. Billy Murphy is one of your biggest fans. Why is he such a fan?
I respect Billy. I love him so much. He's been there for me through thick and thin. And oftentimes when you're going through a storm, you have so many folks that are whispering in your ear, like, I got your back. Mind you, they're whispering in your ear. And so you're like, okay, well, I'm out here. I turn around. Y'all must be way back because I don't see nobody, right? And then you have those that step up in major ways. And Billy has always been there for me. Since when I charged those officers on May 1st, 2015, that hate mail, the death threats, the mock, the ridicule, the suits, they've been coming literally for my law license. I get an attorney grievance. I got to tell you every 3 months. And so you got to hire lawyers to defend, what is right in this country. And so I love and appreciate Billy. He's highly respected in the legal community. He's brilliant. And he's been there for me through thick and thin. And so, he's on my commercials right now as I'm running for my 3rd term. And I'm just grateful for his support.
I love the fighter in you.
Well, I mean, that's just me. Honestly, someone said something to me the other day and they were like, oh, you just fight, you fight. I think I've been like that since I was young. But more importantly, like when you think about the need for progress in this country, right? I feel like I represent the queens of this world and the foundation of this nation, and that's Black women. And so I have no choice. It's bigger than me. What did I say? My quote was, I would not reject my strength, though it's not by choice, but responsibility. And so, I'm going to fight. I'm going to fight against a system that is disproportionately impacting people of color for far too long. I'm going to utilize my power and discretion to ensure racial equity and equality and make America live up to its ideals of justice and freedom and equality for everybody. And we haven't done that. And so, yes, that to me is well worth fighting for.
So how do you hold it together with these people banging on you?
Kicking my teeth in every day.
Every day. How do you do it? I want to know. I personally want to know because I don't know. I might have gotten violent by now or snatched somebody or paid Black Stevie to throw somebody in the trunk. I don't know. How do you keep it together?
Well, first of all, I mean, I represent, I have to remember that it's greater than me. I remember I was in the community. It was the first time that I won. And this is when it really like dawned on me. And I had my epitome, my moment where I had a little girl. She was 8 years old. And she walked up to me and she said, Marilyn Mosby, I voted for you. And I looked at this baby who clearly didn't vote, but somebody had explained the fundamental right to her. And in that moment, she could see herself in me. And so one of the things that I keep into perspective is that I have to represent that little girl. I have to represent Black women. I have to represent so much more than myself. Do I have my moments? Absolutely. Right? Like in those moments, will I ever let anybody see me, bowed head and broken? Right? Like, absolutely not. And do I get my feelings hurt sometimes? Yes. And am I human in certain moments? Absolutely. Like when, you have a random white man in the middle of a pandemic that walks up to you and starts shouting in your face and you don't know if it's an anti-masker, you turn around and you're like, sorry. Right. So like it happens. I'm human. And every now and then somebody would just get on my nerves on that Twitter and I'm like, I got it. And then my people will calm me down. But I have an awesome team, right? And so understanding, I have, run the largest law firm in the city of Baltimore. I have an outstanding team, as you talked about, Zy Richardson, and I have to represent them. And so I put it into perspective. When I want to go off, I second guess. I'm like, all right, Marilyn, let's breathe, calm down, and then we're gonna exercise grace in this moment. And my faith, like it's bigger than me.
Tell me about faith.
I mean, that's everything. God is everything to me. I would not be here if it wasn't for my faith. I truly believe that God is, I pray every day that, he gives me the strength to be able to do this job. And he's done it thus far. And I'm confident in his ability to carry me through any and every storm. And so that is what has grounded me. And I'm good. I might have my moments. I'll pray. I might cry to myself, but then I'm gonna get up and I'm gonna put my armor on and I'm ready to battle. I'm ready to fight. What did you say about me? Let's talk about facts, right? Like that's God. That has nothing to do with me and everything to do with him.
What do you hope for the future?
Well, we still got so much more to do. And so what I'm hoping and what we're seeing all across the country are these like scare tactics that are being employed because there's an increase in violent crime. And so, there was just a mention on Fox 45 about stop and frisk. Do we need to re-implement stop and frisk? That scares me, right? And so,
because it was abused. It was abusive.
It was extreme. It was
targeted.
It was targeted and it created the environment that we just came out of. And that scares me. So when you say what's in the future, we have to first, I hope people will get out and vote and will reelect me because we have so much more work to do. We have so much more to accomplish and being a national model, a global model. I told you, Scotland is modeling our policies in Baltimore. London is considering modeling our policies in Baltimore. I met with
Philadelphia and Atlanta have followed suit in certain ways behind you also, haven't they?
Yeah. I mean, nationally, yes. A number of my colleagues across the country, but even I met with a delegation from Kosovo who are looking to model, some of my sentencing review unit. And so we have more work to do and I'm ready to do it. I'm gonna roll up my sleeves and let's get to work. Let's reform the criminal justice system. Let's be that national model and let's not allow them to make me an example, because if they are able to make me an example, considering all that they've done, it sends a chilling effect on every prosecutor in this country. I can tell you right now, my colleagues are like, I don't want that heat. I ain't gonna do what she did because that comes with too much heat. And Baltimore has a chance to push back. Like the world, not necessarily the world, but the nation is watching right now. All that they've done to try to disparage me from reforming the criminal justice system. If we send a message back that, nah, we got this, that messes them up. That messes them up majorly. But if we don't show up to vote and we don't elect me back in office, I'm just going to tell you a lot of that reform is going to die.
I want to say that I've invited a lot of politicians, even in this current election, to historic Pennsylvania Avenue, to the Avenue Market. I want to report on this show that I've never invited Marilyn Mosby to historic Pennsylvania Avenue, in particular Legends. Some dub it as the most violent sub shop in the world. But on one occasion, I saw you at the smoothie stand,
Absolutely.
unsolicited, at the Avenue Market. And I say that because it's quite different than my experience with the rest of the politicians who had to be told or asked to come to Pennsylvania Avenue. So I give you mad kudos for that. But
that's Doni, that's where I live. I live right off of Pennsylvania. I mean, right there off North Avenue.
You came through there, and it's a difference when when people have to be told to come through and when people normally come through. Leonard Ham, it is nothing to see him walk through that market, but not everybody is built like that. You are built like that. But for the young people, for our young brothers and sisters,
yeah,
at Legends on Lawn Street, half a block from Pennsylvania at Lawrence to Fremont and Lawrence, what is your message to them? And let me just, for those who may not know, on that block, you're liable to see anything in terms of drugs, hustling, addiction, addicts, dope lines, anything. And every day I know I have to be a light to somebody on that strip. And for me, I'm going to keep it 100 with you. The greatest honor is coming through that strip, and a newbie will say that he has coke, dope, and rock, and another one will tell him, not him. Like, take that elsewhere. What is your message to, and I care very much about, I don't know what else to do. I've asked the mayor to come through. What is your message to our young men and women who sling all day, who stand on that corner excessively long? I want them to have a life. I want them to know, if I could just get a stretch limousine and put them in there and just take them to dinner, or take them, we go to DC, go see a play. I want them to see more than just Pennsylvania Avenue all day, every day.
I do too.
What's our message to them?
So, I mean, even before we go there, and I'll say what I would say to them, but Frederick Douglass said it best. It's easier to build strong children than it is to repair broken men. And so one of the reasons why I created a crime control and prevention division out of my office is that we have to figure out ways in which we can get to our babies before it's too late. And so if you look at, the programs that we've implemented, and we didn't have the resources to be able to do it. We go into the schools. We adopt 3 schools every school year. We've been doing it for 7 years. We touch more than 540 4th and 5th graders. We try to introduce them to public service careers, build a rapport with them. And some of those young kids, I mean, we try to focus on behavioral schools where they have issues. They're coming from environments where they have behavioral issues. And you can probably remember, did you have officer friendly in your school and you had a rapport with law enforcement? That's what we've attempted to do with our babies. And we try to, keep them as much as we can. Then we have the Junior State's Attorney Program, where we've had more than 340 young people in the summertime, where they go through, we partner with the Mayor's Office of Employment Development and Youth Works, and we pay them to start in the 911 call center, evidence control room, Foxtrot, Federal Circuit, District Court. And at the culmination of the 6 weeks, they do a mock trial competition at the University of Baltimore School of Law, where they can then see themselves as judges, prosecutors, and police. 95% of the young people that have gone through that program have graduated from high school, are in college, or on a career track, and 33% of them are actually in a field of criminal justice. And then we have our pop-ups, right? We do that every Friday night, and we've been doing this for the past 6 years, where we looked at the data and there's a drastic sort of increase in youth violence. And so we want them off those streets. We want them to be productive. And so and some of this is funded directly from my deputies, who come out of their pocket to make sure that they have, whether it's bowling or skating or laser tag, and we're able to feed them. We do that every summer just so that we can get them off the streets. And so they're not in an environment where they're influenced by individuals that are selling drugs on the corner or getting into trouble or being unproductive. And we just did our latest pop-up on Friday at Shake and Bake. We had 500 young people plus their parents show up. And so, I agree that it's you want to instill hope in individuals. And I can tell you that I've been literally going around and trying to encourage people, some guys on the corners, like, get off these corners and go to the polls. And why is it, no, I don't vote. Well, right now, We're not Georgia, thank God. You can register to vote. You can vote the same day. I had a van. I'm bringing them, go to the poll. You need to vote. You need to vote because your life is going to change if we don't put the right people in positions. And so that's what I would say to folks. And on those corners and doing what they're doing is like, you got to make sure that we're getting the right people in these positions that are going to present opportunities for you. There are, 28% of our population in Baltimore live in poverty. 35% of children live below poverty. There are 18,000 vacant houses, 16,000 vacant lots. The unemployment rate for young African-American men between the ages of 18 and 24, which is more than twice that of whites. We have got to do something different. And so, that is what I would impress upon those young guys on the corner. But that's also what I impress upon my babies so that they don't end up on those corners.
Any final thoughts?
I just want to say thank you for inviting me. This was fun. And I'm glad that I got the invitation and got to sit down and talk with you and your audience. I appreciate all that you do for our community and your voice, as you stated. There are so many voiceless within our community, but when it comes to you tell it straight. And unfortunately, everybody in this society is too politically correct and afraid. There's a whole lot of people, and even in elected positions in this city and in this state, that have no balls. Like, let's be real. And you do.
I'm glad you have testicular.
Hey, I got enough for them. But I would just say, no, please. The one thing I would implore your audience to do is to impress upon the importance of voting. And as I stated, we're not Georgia, and they just changed the laws. So before, if you were on parole or probation or had a felony, you couldn't vote. They don't want you to know this. They're not advertising this, but you can vote. It doesn't matter if you're on parole, probation, you have a felony. Even the guys waiting in pretrial in the jails can vote. Please get out here, exercise your fundamental right.
Could you tell them that again?
Even if you're in jail, it doesn't matter if you're on parole, if you're on probation, you can vote. And the beauty right now between July 7th and July 14th is that you can go into any one of the 7 locations across the city, don't matter which one, you can register that same day and you can vote that same day. And this is in your best interest. If you are concerned about, the discriminatory enforcement and harassment that has been had by individuals in this city for far too long, we cannot go back. And so I need you guys to really pay attention and to encourage others to get out here and exercise that constitutional right.
Madam State's Attorney, we wish you the absolute best. Thank you for taking the time out. Thank you, Zai, for setting this up. Very thorough. And however we can be of assistance, please let us know. We want you to have a fair shot. So anytime you have something that you need to put out there without interruption, please consider us.
I appreciate it. I absolutely will. Thank you, Doni.
Good deal.
Bye.
Good morning, world.